I'll just start by thanking our sponsors. And this evening, an extra special thank you to the sponsors who directly funded the Poets Caravan project, which is the CRD, the City of Victoria, the BC Arts Council, and the Canada Council for the Arts, all of whom provided funding for this project. And for anyone who doesn't know, the Poets Caravan is an interactive digital archive where you can explore poets on the southern Vancouver Island and southern Gulf Island kind of region via a Google Earth map. So you can explore the map, and when you click on the pin of a poet you're interested in, a whole bunch of information opens up, including a video filmed by the talented Lorraine here, for the most part, a few other videographers as well. And other info about the poet, their bio, the text of their poems usually. So it's a really cool project. If you haven't checked it out, take a look at the Planet Earth Poetry website and you'll find a link to check out the map, or you can find all of the videos on our YouTube channel as well. Tonight we have about roughly half of the poets in that archive here in person, all in the same place. I'm so excited to see all of you. So we're going to start off with Marlene Graumetre.
I'm going to read a poem from my Poets Caravan reading, and it was in Macaulay Point in Esquimalt, where I live. And for the last 24 years, most mornings, I take a long walk there. This poem refers to a bird called the red knot, which is an endangered shorebird. Carried in the marrow, a Macaulay Point squall flays exposed skin, spars with tree trunks, turning the leaves into a knot of fists shaken at the sky. Green river of spring grass becomes a whirlpool at your feet. Your body's salt water roils with the Pacific's plastic maelstrom. In your marrow, the howl. A great wind gathers to blow us over the edge. Drones hover above resident orca pods, photograph gaunt bodies. Bones grief hollowed, you imagine crossing the burning continent, pulled into the migration of red knots from Tierra del Fuego to their Arctic summer breeding grounds. How to navigate our planet's erratic pulse, the Atlantic's sluggish flux. Emaciated, the red knots alight on a beach in Delaware Bay to feed on the buried eggs of horseshoe crab, a vanishing feast. Thank you.
On the unceded territory of the Cowichan tribes and the Comatsan people. I'm so grateful for that heritage. I'm just back from running a 10-day retreat in Umbria, Italy, and that's a story in itself with COVID hitting me in particular. But we survived it all, and one of the adventures that we did was to do a glosa on poems written about Italy by English-speaking poets. So Franz Wright, his father James Wright, Jim Moore, Charles Wright, and also the great Nobel Prize-winning poet Czesław Miłosz. And I picked 4 lines from his poem In Milan. And so the job is to do 4 stanzas, and the last line of each stanza in order is the 4 lines. So this poem is called Prayer in Umbria, and the 4 lines from Czesław are these ones. I do not deny that I would like to gobble up all existing flowers, to eat all colors. I have been devouring this world in vain for 40 years. 1,000 would not be enough. Czesław Miłosz from In Milan. In a time when distance seems safest, when the sky holds a blue I cannot touch, holds back the truth of black I know from night, when so much of what I see isn't the real thing. No hands in my eyes to reach out and touch the cypress outside my window, or downslope the hard noises of the steel plant, the beep, beep blurt out from the front end loaders backing up inside the mill's open mouth roar. I do not deny that I would like to gobble up all the sights and sounds and become them. distance left behind like the one left on the platform as the train moves off, and soon even the diesel rumble gone too. I would like to believe it's true, this wish for nothing between me and the world, a mystic's wish for the dervish dance, its impossible spin, to turn toward and away, to embrace all existing flowers, to eat all colors, and become something other, neither flower nor color of flowers, or all the other colors, nor this man's body, its breath, its inhale, its exhale, the toward, the away, in and out, the always in motion, the roar blood makes in a stethoscope, the roar of a steel plant in spring in Umbria, the in of the ore and the out of the steel, and the turn of the machinery. It seems I have been devouring this world in vain, remaining the same, me, here, you and the world out there, truly this unreachable thing, past sight and sound, touch and smell, the baked out midday breath of cedar, of dry grass, of a day lounging in its gift of sun. And I wonder, what if the day could devour me, like light devours the sun, and I could travel through distance at light's speed? And what if I could inhabit its brilliance, at least for 40 years? 1,000 wouldn't be enough. I wonder, what if the day could devour me, the light like the light devours the sun, and I could travel through distance at light speed, and what if I could inhabit its brilliance at least for 40 years? 1,000 wouldn't be enough. Thank you so much.
This is called Bananas. Who'd have thought to do that to a banana, she asks of the golden discs, fringed with sugar that tile this loaf so carefully, containing odd blacknesses where the heart of a banana bled into batter, its sweetness coloring as it baked. Full of surprises, these tubes in their sunshine wrappers, nature showing us how to package. Unzip one and it never fails to follow its line, dropping hems in its haste to emerge, these lobes so bland and pleasureful. Pull another trick from the hand of bananadom. Lay them peeled naked, sliced long and resting on their cuts, on a baking dish bedded with thin sheets of butter. Strew them with brown sugar and bake till the scent torments you from the table. Pillow them hot in dishes of ice cream, the color they once were. They will melt like the softest heart. Thank you.
This book is called Earl Street. I decided to read from this book, and last night, as we were looking out the window, a deer appeared in our backyard. Now, we have secured that backyard within an inch of its life. We practically have guns up there, but never mind, the deer got in. So this poem is called Come the Ungulate, and so I decided to read it because of last night. But we all know that the deer have been coming down from the university without their degrees and now are everywhere in Victoria. Come the ungulate through the streets, the gates, come the deer, they will, on sidewalks, small groupings. Come the doe and the fawn, families, come the buck. Through the streets as if there were none, they will complicate. 5 or 6, they thread through, across, ignoring the cross. They will, intersections, 3 fawns behind, they will on the diagonal. Stop signs or stoplights, come the deer. They will at their own laneways and boulevards, ungulate, they will regal, their pace they will slow, through cars they will, from the north they come, laneways, they will roads, into backyards, front yards, they will graveyards in the southern direction, as if preferring the young tops of short trees, miniatures, pear trees and cherries, they will, over fences, arrive. Come the roses, prefer, they will yellow and red, recline. The cemetery is 200 years old, they will, overlooking the ocean, range until the ocean, lie down as if no one, lounge between headstones, they are not ready to die. 3 buck, they will ruminate, consume, come the deer. Out of campuses and government gardens, come the deer, come the people, the love, come the hate. Under street lamps, weave, come the park. They will bend their dark shadowed necks under spliced overhead light. 3 deer on the grass. Flower beds and hedges, antlers, charcoal gray, navy blue. They could be 3 oversized hounds under the broken beam, stillness below the 3 a.m., the window. They will, paying no attention, as if no human population, no houses. They will, their place. Come the doe, buck, come the fawn. Come cougar, hunger, come evening, the night. Thank you.
You're starting to get a flavor of part of what got me very excited about this project, which is working with individual poets and gradually learning how much place and poem and poet all get entangled. And that was a wonderful example of how the place was shaping, and based on your reactions, how familiar it is to everybody, that particular encounter with animal life in the city here. So it's my pleasure to introduce the next set of readers. We'll go to Kate Braid.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the First Nation on whose territory we are so lucky to be. I'm not going to read one of the poems from the series because this came up in the meantime. But it's also related. A lot of trees on Pender Island, which is where I spend as much of my time as I can. This is called The Afterlife of Trees, and I wrote it around the time of the Fairy Creek protests. After they are separated from their roots, chainsaw, handsaw, bow saw, chop, laid roughly to rest on a truck's bed, buck saw, sash saw, frame saw, pit, and hauled, that word, to a mill, gang edger, resaw, circular saw, whip, 2x4, 2x6, 2x10, 4x6, etc., etc. They're dead, you say. Lumber, sawdust, wood pellets, chip. Yet each continues in new form to bend, buckle, shrink, expand, change color for longer than any human life. And if you plant a dead wood sailing mast in a bucket of oil, it sucks up the oil. Dead, you say. Now it's useful, you say. While the few remaining trees continue to nourish birds, animals, insects, mosses, algae, remove and store carbon dioxide, produce oxygen, purify air, conserve water, prevent soil erosion, offer sanctuary from storm, flood control, delay forest fires, all if allowed to grow in a natural mix of species, contribute to cooling and, oh yes, offer comfort and peace to humans. Beauty, anyone? How do you measure use?
One of my best friends died this spring. I met her when I was 15 in Nairobi, and she was this exotic older woman from New York. I'm sure she was all of 33. And I think every 15-year-old should have an older woman in her life who's not her mother. She was an artist model for David Levine. She partied at Studio 54 and woke up in bed next to rock stars and She had, in her later life, she opened a used and rare bookstore in Littleton, New Hampshire. So every time I'm in here, I can picture myself in that little space with her and her books. And she also made beautiful jewelry. That was one of her many talents. So this is a grief poem. It's about a lot of people who've died. But we talk about keeping a piece of somebody with us, and that's what this is about. And speaking of jewelry, there is a jeweler in Sydney who will make beautiful glass beads with ashes in them. And so that's part of what inspired this poem. Symbiosis. I gouged out my right eye, the one I'd see you out of the corner of when you stepped into my studio. I buried my eye next to the orange azalea you tended, not because you liked azalea, but because I did. I took a teaspoon of your ash to the glassmith, who flame-worked my grief and spun a small blue planet. I popped the planet into the hole where my eye used to be. In this way, you see what I see. I cut a narrow branch of cedar, took it to the carver who hollowed 5 long cedar toes to fit over my own. I nailed the wooden toes into the bones of my left foot, making it the same length your foot was. In this way, your sock fits my foot, and your shoe fits my foot. In this way, you walk where I walk. I punctured my eardrum with your narrowest drill bit, wanting the level of deafness you had. Your hearing aid was too big for me, so I sliced my ear until it fit. Sutured cartilage with tidy stitches, turned up the bass. In this way, the cashier asking, "Did you find what you were looking for today?" sounds like your throaty rumble. In this way, my own crying sounds like you are humming for me a low, low tune. Thank you.
Most of you know, but I now have a 15-month-old son. So, I mean, my wife might deserve more applause than I do, but he's been a glorious entry into our lives. But having him made me return to some like really scattered childhood memories, living in a home where there was alcoholism, violence, in the 80s, mostly early 90s, and a lot of it that I don't remember, and trying to write what pieces I have back into being and having a different empathy for the child that I was, who I always seemed much more adult than I now see could be possible. Looking at my own little toddler, I'm like, how could some? Anyway, sorry. These are 3 pieces from this kind of longer document that I'm working on, not finished, little prose pieces, prose poems. After the gun incident. Midnight, snow welded to snow, pulled glare from a star, a light bulb a mile off. You and it were silos, alone for trying. On that stoop you found Pat's auto parts, some dropped rag or glint of oil. 40+ years and its odor and agreement and talc are with you still. Loneliness at the back of your throat, a sign of illness. Your dad drives through snow, your aunt and mom in the back and you up front, your head on the window. Blue motel doors, chopped looking, nearly firewood, bolted all the same. Tanya Tucker's Delta Dawn chisels from the radio as you drive in slurred snow to the hospital. From the back seat, your mother takes your elbow. Cigarette, she asks. Faster and faster, blackened ridges of snow. Her voice swivels, a swatch of vinegar, a pelt of mold. I know you have one. knuckled grip at your elbow. Hand it over, you little shit. Your aunt removes the mother's hold. Traffic lights churn. Power lines wag for a cigarette. The night, breathless like a tire losing traction. Tanya sings in miniature inside the radio. A flight more talon than wing, far down in curved sheet metal. If you were to drop his cigarette, it would fall without spinning, a light wand that disappears in darkness. The next day, you skip school. At your aunt's, on a Macintosh computer, lockbox large, you walk the carefree house of the murdered. The screen faint yellow with black pixels marking people, objects, doors, choices, dialogues. You see a carton. Do you look inside? Yes, no. Inside, a solitary raspberry furred with mold. All choices lead you to one terminal place. Do you talk to them? Yes, no. Do you try to wake them? There is near the grout a misstep. There is a plant with pods that bulge. No depictions of violence, nothing gruesome. Almost as if no violence occurred at all. Things, a fork, a letter opener, a key on a table, and a heap nearby that might be a body asleep. You move from room to room searching for a clue, a red flag where the tension is. You go from one dialogue box to another until you find it. Thank you.
This is a more recent poem than, it's not one of the ones I read at Harling Point, AKA the Chinese Cemetery, but I think it might be on point in any case. Trying to sing in Ukrainian. It helps that I'm in a church, standing close, in an ensemble, a pack. Some of us clap, others might tap. It helps that I'm in the sanctuary. To warm up our voices, our tongues, we make sounds that seem to arrive from nowhere. We sing prayer for Ukraine. We stand grouped under the cross. Lord, O the great and almighty, protect our beloved Ukraine. Bože veliki jedine, nam Ukrainu krane. My tongue curls up, touches my palate. Breath comes up from deep in my diaphragm, struggles to get out. I greet these sounds as they surface from a place, a language populated by consonants, hard to pronounce, a lot of weight to hold, with little space for those open vowels that carry the breath outward into song. Bless her with freedom and light of your holy rays. The musical number we sing, the number of bodies in Bucha, the musical clefs marked on a page I look at now. I'm an alto, but can read the bass clef in case of emergency. One of the tenors has his own baton that he moves in swift, short strokes to keep pace with our conductor. With this kind of music and performance, you never know. I may lose my place. I may need to jump down, find my way to the tenor part, as if going underground, the sound carrying me in or out of a time, a place, a tunnel. I must navigate those lines of Cyrillic script, lettering laid out on the page, a passage dark and closed, a track taking us singers further toward that imagined speck of light. In this choir, the script held in our hands, bless us, O Lord, with good fortune, with learning and knowledge, enlighten us, your children. To learn this music, we listen for tone, the history it holds. We answer as an echo, blending in, bouncing back from afar, call and response. An arc of sound travels the distance. A cry, a moan, forms itself into a word, a prayer. Let us, O Lord, grow. May we forget the very idea of language, the meaning of words. May some spark survive the rough passage we navigate into music. An animal calls out. A dog lifts its head, stretches its neck upward, cries out, calls the pack to assemble, howls in this music to the moon, beautiful and dismal, shining still bright in the night sky.
I'm going to keep on with the I call them the sad poems. And I'm an open book, so I'm fine to be talking about this. Around 11 years ago, I had a miscarriage. I now have an almost 10 and 13-year-old. And when this poem surfaced, as I was processing all of that, this poem has just always been kind of interesting to me because title and poem and everything just fell on the page and it just came out of me, but I honestly didn't know where this poem was coming from. And it wasn't until a while after that I was reading it again and was actually able to look at my own poem and go, oh, that's what that's about. So that doesn't usually happen, but as poets, I'm sure maybe it has happened to you as well. So it's called Fossil. I know the dark places you go to, down in the watery part of your heart, a refuge from your body desert, where the echoes cannot reach and you listen only to the hollowness in your bones. The places below the surface light, it grounds you to dig under stone and reason and discover again all of it imprinted on your hand, heart, body, and bones, like a quiet map leading you back. You, a soft, dark question, something unfinished, still strangely whole, as a moth's severed wing caught in glass, or a child's bone unearthed from a long sleep. Did you ever hear my sing-song voice? While your brother sounded the small, hopeful word in his shy mouth. Thank you.
Thank you all for your lovely poems so far. This one is a rather frivolous edition. It wasn't part of the Caravan poems. But since trigger warnings are now so fashionable, this is to say that none of the poem applies to any of the lovely men here tonight. It's a ballad, but I've structured it like a glosa from 4 lines of a poem by Louise Bogan. They wait when they should turn to journeys. They stiffen when they should bend. They use against themselves that benevolence to which no man is friend. And this is the Ballad of Ernie's Wisdom. Women don't know what they want, says her Ernie, like Penelope weaving, unweaving that shroud, like the neighbor concealing her black eye while Gordy sings, "That's what you get for loving me," so melodiously. Like gals that work Walmart till Sweetie's done law school, outgrows them. Then first thing they're nagging and nagging for child support, maintenance. They all want it both ways. She listens to Ernie, the burdens men carry, but sees that the problem with women is always they wait when they should turn to journeys. They've no sense of humor, her Ernie continues. Like that firefighter dame, she was probably a dyke, when the boys, for a joke, filled her work boots with shit, and she whines about guys when she needs to prove loyalty. They can't take a joke and they can't reach our standards. They don't show no gratitude when they invade. During meetings with women, he sharpens his pencils on a cute sharpener shaped like a girl's bum upturned. Humorless, no fun. The problem with women, they stiffen, says Ernie, when they should bend. The money she'd saved through her teen years for med school before she met Ernie and had to prove loyalty went for his school fees, later his business, while she, working retail, curdled with rage. But she stands by her man when his new office manager, who shouldn't flaunt assets, wear tight skirts and such, says she's just being friendly and open, not flirting. It must be her period, says Ernie. His spouse sees that women who offer true friendship can find that they use against themselves that benevolence. Now Ernie's alone, and he's painting the town and nursing his bitterness night after night. And bartenders listen and pour him another, and guys sympathize after all that you've done for her. Fanning his outrage, she won't get a cent. You should show her who's boss, you should shame her on Facebook. But Ernie's ex blossoms, it's fuel to the fire. She's taking night classes, writes poems, and does Tai Chi. She's got a good counselor, shows a resilience to which no man is friend. Thank you.
Well, there's quite a few wonderful mountains to climb and to hike up around Shawnigan Lake, but this poem is based on El Capitan in Yosemite Park. And it's about the oldest woman to climb El Capitan, Deirdre Wolownik, on her 70th birthday. And of that achievement, her son, the famous climber, Alex Honnold of Free Solo fame, said, "She's not the fastest and she's not the strongest, but she is willing to stick with it for a long, long time and just keep grinding." So, first, hike through giant sequoias, stands of hemlock and lodgepole pine, then clamber over boulders following the Merced River to the base. Looking up, it's not possible to see the summit of El Capitan. Face to face with a 3,000-foot granite monolith, an igneous streaked grimace gives nothing away unless you count the frequent rock falls that take out interlopers, or see it as one climber did, a building wave looming above you. Here's a safer viewpoint. Countless photos taken at sunset from far down the valley feature a bright angular patch of orange light above the dead gray granite below. In one photo, clouds froth around the summit, catching the last light, creating an illusion of lava and flames, but the entire structure is the inner core of an ancient volcano. When she started climbing, Deirdre said she just wanted to get closer to her son, the famous one always shimmying up mountains around the world. After a long career of teaching languages, she wanted to understand his vocabulary, quick draw, jugging, and trad. So at 60, referring to herself as a lumpy old mum, she began to go to the gym. The first time she climbed El Capitan took 13 hours up and 6 back down on the lurking fear route. Just walk steeply uphill, endlessly grabbing whatever tiny edges you can find, she advises. Perhaps, I think, like writing poetry, sometimes slow plodding, and how it's not possible to see the whole poem at first, but forms emerge as adjectives and adverbs fall away. Handholds aren't enough, of course. Footholds are needed to stay close to the idea. And suddenly, there you are clinging, tongue, breath, sinew, and bone against the poem. Deirdre humbly offers herself up as an example of autumnal success. It's never too late to start a new hobby. Then she describes the risks of falling on that first day of her 70th year. I'd roll down slab after slab, breaking parts of me at every bump of rock, until I reached the edge. Then I'd sail out over the valley to plummet down 3,200 feet to the valley floor. Looking at a picture of El Capitan, I contemplate a new hobby and decide for now to reach for verbs and nouns, to put down one word after another, to just keep grinding across the page.
I like reading about women from history, and one of them I found was Philippa Moniz Perestrello, better known as Mrs. Christopher Columbus. And she was a nun with a fantastic library, ended up married, as you do. So this is Mrs. Columbus in her library. Cristoforo married me for my library, and I him for convenience. Family wealth a factor, too. I'm sure he calculated the cost of 3 ships, 3 crews, and supplies for a long voyage. He came into the library one morning in spring, lilacs at the window, my dress to match. But his eyes fell on the shelves, atlases, logbooks, diaries, and sea journals. His fingertips grazed their spines. I waited, untouched, quiet beside the glass cases, knowing he would come to them. 3 quick steps across the room, a hurried buongiorno. I heard him gasp at the astrolabes laid out before him. His mind on latitude, not on me. Cristoforo wooed me with dedication, praised my temperament and my collection of charts. He explored my tomes and heart with unequal passion. He strayed from the love seat at the window, chose a compass over a book of love poems. A sand glass took his fancy while I counted the minutes, guessed how long it would take him to ask for my hand, library included. Father's school of navigation, part of the dowry. Oh, I knew his heart was on the sea, and mine ashore among my books. Spices from India, silks from the Orient, these are not the riches I desire. I'll be here with scrolls and parchments, texts from ancient Greece and Rome. The curvature of the earth, more compelling than the curvature of my breast. Be gone then, measure celestial bodies to your heart's content. But what is marriage but exploration? Uncharted waters, undiscovered lands. I can abide a husband on the other side of the world, gone for years, maybe gone forever. Yes, take the cross staff and quadrant. Cast off, I told him, and sail to your more alluring horizon.
I read something recently which said, if trauma can be passed down, so can healing. And I realized that that connects nicely to a poem that I wrote a while ago, and I'll read that for you tonight. We learned early on the ache of missing someone, of missing the first person who is supposed to love you, of missing a parent turned absent through toxic nights to earn foreign dollars. We learned early on what a body without presence looks like, what unmet expectations feel like, what it does to internalize another's misery as one's own deficiency, of thinking the depression of another is the outcome of not having been enough. We learned early on to fear the switch, the blast of emotion unleashed, the pain of leaving home, aching bodies, residues of war. We learned early on to coil inwards, to keep secret the pains of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, the trickling of trauma from generation to generation. But now we have learned. We have learned the hurt and the history, the responsibility to free ourselves, to walk with a lightened load, to lessen the baggage that is passed down so that years from now, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren can walk nimbly with spirit and vitality. Thank you.
What a great community. Many of you know that last week, why I was here, Zoe's reference was that I was launching Patrick Lane's last poems, which came out 3 years after his death, and his son, his youngest son, Richard, read, and our 14-year-old granddaughter was up here too, so it was a very, very special evening. And I couldn't help but think tonight, I think 99% of the readers so far worked with Patrick at one time or another, so it's lovely to see this legacy. My friend up here, Nuria Mia Riera, is from Catalonia, and she invited me to her university a few years ago, and she translated several of my poems into Catalan. So I'm just going to read one, and Nuria is going to read it in Catalan. I thought you'd like to hear that language, and it's not very often. I know you get the chance to hear Catalan, which is different from Spanish. And it's been a delight to have her here. She's doing her PhD on my poetry, so she thinks she's going to see wild animals everywhere in Canada, and we have yet to see a deer. So we're going to go to Arlene's next week if we haven't seen one by then. And I have dozens of raccoons in my garden, but they haven't shown their masked faces since Nuria arrived, so who knows what's going on there. Many of you know that Patrick had a problem with alcoholism, and he had 20 splendid years of sobriety. And this poem comes from my new book, which is coming out next fall, called After That. I'm going to read it first in English so you can get the gist, and then we'll get the lovely Catalan reading. Almost a children's story. One day, you met a fox by the railroad tracks. Both of you stopped in the tall grass and looked at one another. "Don't make a big deal out of this," said the fox. "I'm just a fox." One day you met a magpie high in the spruce. Both of you stayed still and looked at one another. "Don't make a big deal out of this," said the magpie. "I'm just a magpie, but if you want to help, tell the monk to put away his rifle. I won't eat the robin's babies." One day you met a snake between the raspberry bushes. Both of you froze and looked at one another. He'd been sipping the clear liquid around the mouths of the bottles hidden in the woodpile, the ivy, the brambles. When he spoke, he slurred and hissed. It was hard for you to listen, but you're sure he didn't say, "I'm just a snake." Did this mean he was someone else? It was a haunting, a visitation? Why is it the bad days come back and not the good?
Gairebé un conte infantil. Un dia us vau trobar una guineu a les vies del tren. Ambdós us vau aturar els canyissos i us vau mirar l'un a l'altre. "No en feu un gra massa d'això", va dir la guineu. "Només sóc una guineu". Un dia us vau trobar una garsa dalt de l'avet. Ambdós us vau quedar quiets i us vau mirar l'un a l'altre. "No en feu un gra massa d'això", va dir la garsa. "Només sóc una garsa". Però si voleu ajudar, digueu-li al monjo que aparti el rifle. No em menjaré els pollets del pit roig. Un dia us vau trobar una serp entre els esbarzers. Ambdós us vau quedar petrificats i us vau mirar l'un a l'altre. Ella havia estat xarrupant les gotes de líquid del coll de les botelles amagades a la pila de llenya, dins de l'heura, a les bardisses. En parlar, balbucejava i xiuxiuejava. Et costava sentir-lo, però estàs segura que no va dir «soc només una serp». Volia dir que ell era algú altre? Era un fantasma? Una aparició? Per què deu ser que recordem els mals moments i no els bons?
The second poem I ever wrote in English back in 2017, so we're going on kind of a language theme here with Lorna. And the poem has a language theme too, to which I have to say that unfortunately it has taken on another dimension now that is sad, but it's called "Sometimes I Think My Soul Speaks Russian." Sometimes I think my soul speaks Russian. I can't quite understand what she says. Psyche, I beg her. I call her Psyche, like the ancients and Edgar Allan did. Psyche, speak to me clearly, in German, French, or English, in Latin or Greek, if you will, or let me make dinner. But she won't. She'll never. She will mumble blunt syllables while I cut leek. Yet I know she has in the past quietly killed off my fears, or replaced them with better ones. So I consent and go on, hoping she'll speak some Western language again when I need her. Until then, only when we watch a film by Tarkovsky, or when I read to her from Chekhov or Handke. She sometimes nods as if hinting, see, that's what I mean, and allows me to sleep. Last month, we watched a dying musician in concert. She heard what was sung and said, but does not like shows. So when they showed the Prime Minister applauding, she just grinned, waiting with ulterior reservations. Being misbehaved and illegal, she'd get deported from everywhere and Russia if she were by herself. Then she kept nagging when people uttered, how special, he's dying, till I asked her straight to the face, what is it? She just shook her head quietly, but later in bed she whispered, don't you feel it strange? We are all dying, but only some of us make music. Thank you.
I have to read something funny and happy. So I'm going to read my favorite poem from Cult Life. And these books are for sale over there, and I have 175 of these because my publisher went under during COVID, and I had to buy them to stop them from being pulped. So that's my sales pitch. Did it work? It's true though, it's 100% true. Okay. This book has a lot of monologues and voices of colourful characters from this ashram that I was a part of in my wayward 20s. This is Rupi. For crying out loud, give it a good squeeze and jiggle it out. It's not a scrotum, it's a marigold. We're working to a schedule, darling. It must fill and flourish, glorying on the master's birthday. You've 2 days. 13 beds in this ashram, so I can't be babying you. This isn't fun and games, sweetheart. This is service. And are we dressed for service? Do you imagine we're off to a garden party? You'll be sashaying in the dirt. I say wear old clothes and you show up in a sundress. No one here cares about your body, and you don't want these neat little granny rows. You're not crocheting. You're not knitting tea cozies. This is a catastrophe of boredom. Dig it all up and start over and smush them in closer. Ignore the how-to tags altogether. I want abundance. I want excess. Think Marie Antoinette. This is an art form. The trowel is your paintbrush, so sketch the soil. No, don't scratch like a cat covering its crap. Use sweeping strokes. Use your whole arm. Don't do what's expected, darling. Go wild. I want spirals. I want galaxies. I want Van Gogh. Think colour bridges. Think tears. No pansies whimpering in the front row with cosmos tall and wispy in the rear. We don't want your grade school photo. Wander forget-me-nots like a brook. Draw the eye toward my lily pond. People must tumble into the blooms and disappear from the world. I'm envisioning watery fairyland mystery. I'm seeing Monet. Come on, darling. Be daring, be outrageous. Look at me, I mean really. I never do what's expected. What do you guess is under this sarong? Y-fronts? I'm loose and fruity as the spring breeze, darling. It's about letting go of who you thought you were. Free yourself from this retro housewife fantasy. Strip off your floral and dirty up, darling. Seriously, just take it off. And garden in your underwear. Garden naked. No one cares. Thanks. Thank you to all the organizers. Thank you.
I feel so fortunate to have been a part of this project and just to be here tonight with all of you and all this amazing poetry in this room feels like a real privilege, so thank you. I performed and recorded poetry in Beacon Hill Park, and through that experience, I learned that Beacon Hill Park is actually called Migan to the Lkwungen-speaking people who have been here since time immemorial. And COVID was interesting, living very close to Beacon Hill Park when the shelters shut down. A lot of people made their homes there. And I have a 6-year-old. He was 4 when this all started. And we had some conversations about why are there people living in tents in the park? And thinking about that, thinking about how do we become who we are? How do we build ourselves up? How do we tear each other down? And I came to the conclusion that the love that we have to offer the world is in some ways a patchwork of the love we have received. And so this fall, I teach art to teenagers, which is also a privilege that I'm so lucky to do. And this fall, I got to do a big weaving with some kids. And thinking about weaving is a really beautiful metaphor for this very thing. And this poem I want to perform for you has some weaving lingo in it, so I like to just give you a little refresher, because not everybody in the room knows. But a loom is the frame that holds the threads, and the warp are the threads that stay stationary, and the weft is the threads that weave in and out. And this poem is called How Beautifully We Are Unmade. There is a canopy stretched on a boundless loom. It is forever being assembled. It is forever being unmade. There has always been this tireless weaving. The star trails of my ancestors form the sturdy warp of this shelter. In this life, many have offered bright strands of their love, pulled from the bottom of their own shelters. Many have unraveled just a little for me. I shuttle the weft of their offerings across the warp of those who came before. They twine to an indigo tapestry always in flux. It is enough to fill the night sky 100 times over. It is enough to fill the night sky for 100 generations. The night sky is full with their joy and suffering. So often I forget I am sheltered until I wrap my body in this cloth, my beginning so tangled with its end. Sometimes my skin is woven indigo, and my scars become star trails. Sometimes my fingers are loom. In this life, I have offered each tiny love and each vast love a thread, unraveled from my own raw edge, my bright filaments a dismantled shelter in their hands. Look, I tell them, look how you can build yourself. Look how beautifully you can be unmade. Thank you.
So I'm going to read a diptych of 2 sonnets. And they're about 2 very different women. For a woman pepper sprayed at Metcalfe and Wellington, February 19th, 2022, Ottawa. Caped in red and white, maple leaf blades hooked upside down from your shoulders, holding fast to a line slick with black ice. You've sparked it, those watching on screen say as you collapse to your knees, pressing your mask-free, tear-streaked face in heaped snow as you recall to rights you're sure you've lost. The eyes you soothe not blinked in 3 weeks, and I'm asked to sympathize, not through cowardice, instead aroused to know why, what chill in the air we each breathe drove you to lean on your horn, leaving you outside in drifts I'm still numb to, not wreathed in exhaust or cut loose in the country you are, searching for a map I can read. In a station of the Kyiv metro, a ghost sitting on the crowded platform beside train cars bedded down with children. You post your petal-faced on Instagram before signal grows dim, phone not plugged in, back against concrete, cross-legged on tile, tacky with bottled water and canned goods. Neighbors dividing them scarcely less pale than you. Trees on streets above yet to bud and may not flower against drifting plumes, shells fired in waves from Belarus stencil across your emptied tower block. Living room gaping through walls partway sloughed, guts reduced to landfill. Sun's face saved to Pinterest, petal among petals, smudged by what lasts. Thank you.
I think I've lived in just about every part of the city, actually. My father was a builder, and he'd build a house, and we'd move into it, and then he'd sell it, and then away we went. So I have a great feeling for the many neighborhoods of this city. But I was also thinking how wonderful it is to be in the company of poets, and how it is a great factor in what we do, what we get to do as poets. And so this is a poem about that, and it's a night poem. The title of it is A Life by Water, which you may recognize as the title of a book by Lorraine Nidecker. I was thinking of the poets I have spent time with, an uncurtained night window in front of me, a lamp on, and somebody sleeping in the next room, another behind a screen around a bed on the floor above, quietness informed by breath. One poet said she lived next to a river and its life became her thoughts. They were like water striders easing into a current. I did not know how cold she was, or if she were hungry. I did not think of other lives that had awaited her. Poetry was her love of other species, especially disregarded insects. She refused to kill, and that became her existence. My brother lures mice into boxes with peanut butter smeared trapdoor lids. He frees them in the meadow, but do they hurry away? Or do they re-enter the shelter of the house? I have wondered about reincarnation and words shaped into a song that may never be heard. We might float down the river next summer, or take the path through the woods, or descend to the street on stone steps so steep and worn you must hold to the rail or fall. A man carries a propane tank up 5 floors, so I'll be warm enough to write poetry. I used to dream of someone listening, mice in the walls, a moth against the spotlit window as I shared a candle with a poet on the riverbank. I counted her syllables. I learned her breath and how to hold it. But you would never know. Thank you.
I'm reading 2 new poems. It's going to be a really big show. Really big show. Imagine an expedition on the space station. Our precious planet is massive. Daytime, see the pyramids of Giza, the Wall of China, the Great Barrier Reef, and, believe it or not, traces of Viking ships. At night, See the lights of London, New York, Singapore, or maybe your home city, if it's sprawling and radiating light. You'll see bombs detonate, burning forests and smoke. If you're a scientist, you'll study snow depth in Rocky Mountain meadows, satellite data to predict the survival of alpine butterflies. From the moon, the Earth is a vibrant orb, the same way the full moon shines on us, hurtling outwards from the Earth, an adventure to Mars, Jupiter, or Saturn. The Earth glimmers like a star, fainter the further you go. Imagine a child, someone you know and love, out there, making a wish on this mess we've created. So I took you away from Salt Spring Island. This one's Whirlwind, and I wanted to bow to Yvonne Blomer. I don't think she's here tonight, but there was a line in her new book, in the beginning of the middle of the end, and I've taken it, Whirlwind, in the beginning of the end. In the beginning of the end, you begin to whirl, to swirl, curl up into a mushroom. You begin to plant every inch of soil, dig, weed, nourish, seed. You begin to see how the body bends, cramps, erodes, slows like a snail. In the beginning, you thought you had unlimited time, energy. The planet speaks. No, it yells, wake up. Whirling fir branches, rain, wind, thunder. In the beginning of the end, you smell wildflowers, yellow orchids, pink sea blush, death camas. Whirling in your dream, trees rise straight up into the sky. A second stand, tethered with a rope, ascends and falls. You clear out of the whirling gust, not resisting, the way the sky knows wind, yet fearful for your grandson, his sweet innocence, his love of wheels, things that turn.
A poem that I wrote in my first book in our dialect of the village that my family, my parents came from. I was born here, but they immigrated with 3 kids and had 4 more. So I'll read you this poem in dialect first, and then I won't read the literal translation. You'll have to watch the video for that. But I will read a little short poem that kind of sums up how I feel about the 2 worlds. Nga pukiana de mash. Ma mash de tata luce fanut per me seir. Tutti i figli stanno dormendo ma luta ma tena reke repert. Ma ma che menza chiagni. A vita che in America che faccio ma che cosa sta mengan. Ma sera gente non vanno a fare camminata, passeggiata come facevano a Casa Calenda. A gente vanno a dormire in America. Pina pensava la vita in Italia, dove giornate i figli gli quavano a via, non gestivano i macchi sui cavalli, i ciucci, i gente che parlavano, femmine sole perché i mariti stavano nella masseria. Non vide più i femmine bonite che fanno a cavazzette mezza via, chiacchierevano, belle giornate. Non vide più i galline mezza via, pizza rendini, non vide più i femmine che dicono rosario mezza via, giornate piene di sole. Parlavamo di tempi antichi. E a mondo nessuno fa queste cose, sono tutte perdute. Dice scambano signore, ma dimostra la lingua da vocamizza ne va, e nessuno mi capisce. But I hope you did, Nuria. Maybe a little bit. So I grew up in the Cowichan Valley, so it was actually great to film in Cowichan. And this is called 8 Cottonwood Street. Outside, the rain comes down sideways. The trees, giants, a fast-flowing river can be heard, owls nest, trout jump. Inside this house, it is 30 degrees and the geraniums bloom. Dust from the farm gets tracked in on boots. Horses neigh in the stable down below. This house smells like summer and heat. Tomatoes simmer to become sugo for tonight's meal. Here, the percussive rhythm of a language beats under the house, keeps them dancing in the damp, wet coast.
So I was thinking about place And this moon poem, which theoretically everybody has a moon, this one is very much a place moon. Moon howl. Mess of light behind clouds, spill of luminescence, meandering in the morning, move into my mouth, myrrh and musk and maudlin and nest there. Your monthly making of yourself, your monthly making yourself less. My mollusk tongue warms to your cool fire.
I do have two sisters. They've never really identified themselves, though. I think this is about somebody else. Sisters here and there. My living sister is cooking me dinner. It's the same chicken recipe she's been cooking for 35 years now. It's got something to do with soya sauce and a 450 oven. Sister B is a quasi-vegetarian and allows herself only chicken breast, like the breast had never been part of a real bird. Like maybe it's really a chunk of lumped up tofu. If it was allowed, I'm sure B would FedEx her chicken breasts to be cooked in Area 51 on bomb test weekends. But enough about her. My other sister, the dearly departed one, is sitting on the couch watching Pawn Store Stars and says to me, didn't Mom have one of them button accordions? I can't really answer because I'm the only one who can see Verna today. She does that off and on, switches viewing options. Today she's dressed in an old Fortrell pantsuit. It has a few pulls here and there, but like Mum used to say, perfectly serviceable. Verna's the one got Mum's dirty 30s thrift gene. Still, she has a long death ahead of her, so you can see her point. I worry that the freaky shade of turquoise will reflect in the TV and let them all know she's here again, because it really pisses B off, and she's likely to stomp right out of the house without serving dinner. But we're all good, and B calls from the kitchen, "Come and get it, losers." She means me, of course, and also old Frank and little Dwayne, who are down the back hall, whooping and hollering, playing darts for cigarettes. I say quiet-like to Verna, "Too bad you can't join us." And Verna, never taking her eyes off a rickety old couple clutching a pair of beaver skin stretching boards, says over her shoulder, "Yeah, tough, eh?" Thank you.
So thank you so much, Linda. It just occurred to me as you were reading, we didn't plan this, but Linda was our very first featured reader of season 26 in September, and now she's our very final reader of season 26, so we bookended. I can't believe that worked out that way. And she had us in stitches in September too. So thank you all so much for coming and sharing your poetry, and thank you for being part of this weird and crazy project that we dreamed up.